It was a chilly morning in a small, bustling town. The streets were alive with the usual hum of people rushing to work, children heading to school, and vendors setting up their stalls. Among the crowd was a young man in his mid-20s, walking briskly with a backpack slung over his shoulder. He was on his way to his part-time job at a local bookstore. Life hadn't been easy for him lately. He was juggling work and studies, trying to make ends meet while pursuing his dreams. But despite the challenges, he always wore a warm smile and carried a kind heart. As he turned the corner near the town's central park, he noticed an elderly woman struggling to carry a heavy grocery bag. Her steps were slow, and she seemed to be in discomfort. Without a second thought, the young man approached her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently, "would you like some help with that?" The woman looked up, her eyes tired but grateful. She nodded and handed him the bag. "Thank you, young man. You're very kind," she said with a soft smile. The young man walked beside her, matching her slow pace. He noticed she was heading toward a modest apartment building a few blocks away. Along the way, they struck up a conversation. The woman shared that she lived alone and often found it difficult to manage errands due to her age and health. The young man listened intently, his heart going out to her. He couldn't help but think of his own grandmother, who lived far away in another town. When they reached her apartment, the woman insisted he come inside for a cup of tea. At first, he hesitated, not wanting to intrude, but her warm insistence won him over. Her home was cozy, filled with photographs of family and small trinkets that told stories of a life well lived. As they sat in her small kitchen, sipping tea, she began to share more about her life. She spoke of her late husband, her children who lived in different cities, and how she missed the days when her home was filled with laughter and chatter. The young man found himself deeply moved by her stories. He realized how lonely she must feel, living alone with no one to talk to for days on end. Before leaving, he offered to help her with groceries or any other errands whenever she needed. The woman's eyes welled up with tears. "You're such a kind soul," she said, her voice trembling. "The world needs more people like you." Little did the young man know, this simple act of kindness would soon lead to something extraordinary. As he left her apartment that day, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in a long time. Helping her had brought him a joy that no amount of money or success ever could. But what awaited him in the coming days would leave him in tears and change his life forever. Over the next few weeks, the young man made it a point to visit the elderly woman regularly. He would stop by after work or on his days off, helping her with groceries, fixing small things around her apartment, or simply keeping her company. Their bond grew stronger with each visit. She would often tell him stories from her youth, and he would share his dreams and struggles with her. It was a friendship that transcended age, built on mutual respect and kindness. One afternoon, as they sat in her living room, the woman handed him an old, worn-out photo album. "I want to show you something," she said, her eyes twinkling with nostalgia. As they flipped through the pages, she pointed out pictures of her younger days, her wedding, her children as babies, family vacations, and gatherings with friends. Each photo had a story, and the young man listened with rapt attention, feeling as though he was stepping into a different era. One particular photo caught his eye. It was a black and white picture of the woman standing in front of a small bakery, smiling proudly. "That was my bakery," she said, her voice filled with pride. "I ran it for over 30 years. It was my pride and joy." The young man was amazed. He had no idea she had been a business owner. She went on to explain how she had started the bakery from scratch, working day and night to make it a success. It had been a gathering place for the community, where people would come not just for the delicious pastries but also for the warmth and kindness she extended to everyone who walked through the door. The young man couldn't help but admire her even more. "You must have been so proud," he said. She nodded, but her smile faded slightly. "It was hard to let it go," she admitted. But when my husband passed away, and my children moved to different cities, I couldn't manage it alone. I sold it and retired. Sometimes I miss it terribly." Her voice was tinged with sadness, and the young man felt a pang of sympathy for her. As the weeks went by, the young man noticed that the woman's health seemed to be declining. She moved more slowly, and her energy levels were lower than before. One day, when he arrived at her apartment, he found her sitting in her armchair, looking unusually pale. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, it's just old age catching up with me," she said with a weak smile. But the young man wasn't convinced. He insisted on calling her doctor, who advised her to rest and take things easy. Despite her declining health, the woman remained cheerful and grateful for the young man's presence. She often told him how much his visits meant to her. "You've brought so much joy into my life," she said one evening as they sat by the window, watching the sunset. "I don't know what I would do without you." The young man smiled, but deep down, he felt a growing sense of worry. He couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to her. One day, as he was helping her organize some old boxes, she handed him a small, intricately carved wooden box. "This is for you," she said, her voice soft but firm. The young man was taken aback. "What is it?" he asked, hesitating to take it. She smiled mysteriously. "Open it when the time is right," she said. "But not now. Just keep it safe for me." The young man was puzzled but agreed to take the box. He placed it carefully in his backpack, wondering what could be inside. A few days later, the young man received a call from the woman's neighbor. She had been taken to the hospital after a sudden fall. His heart sank as he rushed to the hospital, fearing the worst. When he arrived, he found her lying in a hospital bed, looking frail but alert. She smiled weakly when she saw him. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The young man sat by her side, holding her hand, trying to hold back his tears. The doctors explained that her condition was serious but stable. She would need to stay in the hospital for a few days for observation. The young man stayed with her as long as he could, refusing to leave her side. That night, as he sat in the dimly lit hospital room, he thought about the wooden box she had given him. He wondered if now was the time to open it, but he decided to wait, respecting her wishes. Little did he know, the box held a secret that would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. As he sat there, watching over the woman who had become like family to him, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the bond they had formed. But the days ahead would bring both heartache and a revelation that would leave him in tears. The elderly woman stayed in the hospital for several days, and the young man visited her every evening after work. He would bring her small things to cheer her up, a book, her favorite tea, or flowers from the market. She always smiled when she saw him, but he could tell she was growing weaker. Her voice was softer, her movements slower, and her energy seemed to fade a little more each day. Despite this, she never complained. Instead, she spent their time together reminiscing about her life, sharing stories the young man would treasure forever. One evening, as he sat by her bedside, she reached out and took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm, and her eyes held a seriousness he hadn't seen before. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice steady but quiet. The young man leaned closer, sensing the importance of her words. "You've been such a blessing to me," she began. "When I first met you, I was lonely and struggling. But your kindness gave me hope. You reminded me that there are still good people in this world." The young man felt a lump form in his throat. "You've been a blessing to me too," he said sincerely. "I've learned so much from you." She smiled faintly and patted his hand. "I want you to promise me something," she said. "Promise me that you'll keep being kind, no matter what life throws at you. The world needs more people like you." The young man nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I promise," he whispered. The next morning, the young man received a call from the hospital. His heart raced as he answered, fearing the worst. The nurse on the other end informed him that the woman's condition had worsened overnight, and she was asking for him. He dropped everything and rushed to the hospital, his mind filled with dread. When he arrived, he found her lying in bed, her breathing shallow but her eyes bright. She smiled weakly when she saw him. "I knew you'd come," she said. The young man sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. "I'm here," he said, his voice breaking. She looked at him with a mixture of love and sadness. "It's time," she said softly. "Time for you to open the box." The young man's heart skipped a beat. He had almost forgotten about the wooden box she had given him weeks ago. He reached into his backpack and pulled it out, his hands trembling. The woman nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead," she said. "Open it." With shaky hands, he lifted the lid of the box. Inside, he found a stack of old letters, a small key, and a folded piece of paper. He unfolded the paper first and began to read. It was a handwritten note from the woman, addressed to him. Her words were filled with gratitude and love, thanking him for the joy he had brought into her life. But what came next left him stunned. The letter revealed that the woman had no living relatives and had decided to leave everything she owned to him. The small key in the box was to a safety deposit box at a local bank, where she had stored her savings and important documents. She explained that she wanted him to have her modest savings to help him pursue his dreams. "You've given me so much," the letter read. "Now it's my turn to give back to you." The young man looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. "I can't accept this," he said, his voice choked with emotion. The woman shook her head gently. "Yes, you can," she said. "You've earned it. Use it to make your dreams come true. That's all I want." The young man was speechless. He had never expected anything in return for his kindness. All he had wanted was to help her, to make her life a little easier. But now, she was giving him a gift that would change his life. The woman closed her eyes, her breathing growing slower. The young man stayed by her side, holding her hand and whispering words of gratitude. A few hours later, she passed away peacefully, with the young man by her side. He sat there for a long time, tears streaming down his face, feeling a profound sense of loss but also an overwhelming gratitude for the time they had shared. The next few days were a blur. The young man made arrangements for her funeral, honoring her with a simple but heartfelt service. He invited a few of her neighbors and friends, who shared stories of her kindness and generosity. It was clear that she had touched many lives, just as she had touched his. After the funeral, the young man went to the bank to open the safety deposit box. Inside, he found a stack of cash, some old jewelry, and a few documents. Among the documents was the deed to her apartment. The woman had left him everything she owned. The young man felt a mix of emotions, grief, gratitude, and a deep sense of responsibility. He knew he had to honor her wishes and use her gift wisely. He decided to use part of the money to pay off his student loans and invest in his education. With the rest, he started a small scholarship fund in her name, helping other young people pursue their dreams. He kept her apartment, turning it into a cozy space where he could study and reflect on the lessons she had taught him. As the days turned into weeks, the young man often found himself thinking about the elderly woman. Her kindness, her wisdom, and her unwavering belief in him had left a lasting impact. He knew he would carry her memory with him for the rest of his life, and he was determined to live up to the promise he had made to her, to keep being kind, no matter what. But the story didn't end there. The woman's gift had set him on a new path, one that would lead to unexpected opportunities and challenges. And as he moved forward, he knew she would always be with him, guiding him with the lessons she had taught him. The young man's life began to change in ways he could never have imagined. With the financial burden of his student loans lifted, he felt a newfound sense of freedom. He poured himself into his studies, determined to make the most of the opportunity the elderly woman had given him. Her apartment became his sanctuary, a quiet place where he could focus on his dreams and reflect on the lessons she had taught him. One day, as he was sorting through her belongings, he found another box tucked away in a closet. It was filled with old recipe books, handwritten notes, and photographs of her bakery. As he flipped through the pages, he felt a surge of inspiration. The woman had poured her heart and soul into her bakery, creating a place that brought joy to so many people. The young man wondered if he could honor her legacy by doing something similar. The idea began to take shape in his mind. He didn't have the skills to run a bakery, but he knew he could create something that would bring people together and spread kindness, just as she had done. He decided to start a small community center in her memory, a place where people could gather, share stories, and support one another. It would be a space filled with warmth and love, just like her bakery had been. With the remaining funds from her gift, the young man rented a small storefront in the heart of the town. He painted the walls in warm, inviting colors and filled the space with comfortable chairs and tables. He hung her photographs on the walls, creating a tribute to her life and the impact she had made. The center quickly became a hub for the community, hosting events like book clubs, art workshops, and free meals for those in need. The young man also started a weekly storytelling night, where people could come and share their experiences. It was a way to honor the woman's love for stories and to keep her memory alive. The first few events were small, but word spread quickly, and soon the center was bustling with activity. The young man felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing he was carrying on her legacy in a meaningful way. One evening, as he was closing up the center, an older man approached him. "I knew her," the man said, pointing to one of the photographs on the wall. "She was a remarkable woman. I used to visit her bakery every week. It was the highlight of my day." The young man smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "She was incredible," he agreed. "I'm just trying to do a little of what she did." The man nodded appreciatively. "You're doing a great job," he said. "She would be proud." The words meant the world to the young man, and they fueled his determination to keep going. As the months passed, the community center became a beloved part of the town. People of all ages and backgrounds came together, forming connections and supporting one another. The young man often thought about the elderly woman and how her kindness had set all of this in motion. He felt her presence in every corner of the center, guiding him and reminding him of the importance of compassion. But life wasn't without its challenges. Running the center was a lot of work, and there were times when the young man felt overwhelmed. There were bills to pay, events to organize, and conflicts to resolve. On those difficult days, he would sit in the quiet of the center, looking at her photographs and drawing strength from her memory. He reminded himself of the promise he had made to her, to keep being kind, no matter what. One day, as he was preparing for a storytelling night, a young woman walked into the center. She looked around nervously, clutching a notebook to her chest. The young man greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome," he said. "Is this your first time here?" The woman nodded. "I heard about this place from a friend," she said. "I've been going through a tough time, and I thought maybe this could help." The young man's heart went out to her. He recognized the look in her eyes, the same look he had seen in the elderly woman's eyes when he first met her. "You're in the right place," he said gently. "We're here to support each other." He invited her to join the storytelling night, and she hesitantly agreed. That evening, the young woman shared her story with the group. She spoke about her struggles with anxiety and how isolated she had felt. The room was silent as she spoke, everyone listening with empathy and understanding. When she finished, the group erupted into applause, and the young woman looked around, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't realize how much I needed this." The young man felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was exactly what the elderly woman had wanted, a place where people could come together, share their burdens, and find hope. He knew she would have been proud. As the center continued to grow, the young man began to think about the future. He wanted to expand the center's programs and reach even more people, but he knew he would need help. He decided to form a small team of volunteers, people who shared his vision and passion for helping others. Together, they worked tirelessly to make the center a beacon of kindness and hope in the community. The young man often thought about how far he had come since that chilly morning when he had first met the elderly woman. Her unexpected gift had not only changed his life but had also allowed him to make a difference in the lives of others. He knew he would never be able to repay her, but he was determined to honor her legacy in everything he did. And as he looked around the bustling center, filled with laughter and conversation, he felt her presence more strongly than ever. She had given him so much more than money. She had given him a purpose, a mission, and a reminder of the power of kindness. The community center continued to thrive, becoming a cornerstone of the town. People from all walks of life found solace and connection within its walls. The young man, now in his late 20s, had grown into his role as the center's leader. He was no longer the uncertain, struggling student he had been when he first met the elderly woman. He was confident, driven, and deeply committed to the mission she had inspired. One day, as he was organizing a charity event at the center, a local journalist approached him. She had heard about the center's impact and wanted to write a feature story about it. The young man was hesitant at first. He had never sought attention for his work, but he realized that sharing the center's story could inspire others to create similar spaces in their own communities. The journalist spent several days at the center, interviewing volunteers, attendees, and the young man himself. She was particularly moved by the story of the elderly woman and how her kindness had sparked this entire journey. When the article was published, it quickly gained attention. People from neighboring towns reached out, asking how they could support the center or start their own initiatives. The young man was overwhelmed by the response. He hadn't expected the center to become so well known, but he was grateful for the opportunity to spread its message of kindness and community. He began hosting workshops and seminars, teaching others how to create spaces where people could come together and support one another. It was exhausting work, but it filled him with a sense of purpose. Despite the center's success, the young man never forgot the elderly woman who had made it all possible. He often visited her grave, bringing flowers and sitting quietly to reflect on her life and the lessons she had taught him. One day, as he sat by her grave, he noticed an older couple approaching. They introduced themselves as distant relatives of the woman, cousins who had lost touch with her over the years. The young man was surprised but welcomed them warmly. He shared stories about the woman and how much she had meant to him. The couple listened intently, their eyes filled with tears. "We had no idea she was living alone," the woman said. "We wish we had known. We would have been there for her." The young man nodded understandingly. "She was a private person," he said. "But she was loved. And her legacy lives on." The couple was deeply moved by the young man's dedication to honoring her memory. Before they left, they handed him an old photograph of the woman as a young girl, standing with her family in front of her childhood home. "We thought you might like to have this," the man said. The young man accepted the photo gratefully, feeling a renewed connection to the woman who had changed his life. As the years went by, the young man's work at the center continued to evolve. He expanded its programs to include mental health support, job training, and even a small library. The center became a place where people could not only find comfort but also build better lives for themselves. The young man often thought about how far he had come and how much he owed to the elderly woman's kindness. One evening, as he was locking up the center, he noticed a young boy sitting on the steps outside. The boy looked to be about 10 years old, his face streaked with dirt and his clothes worn and tattered. The young man approached him gently. "Hey there," he said. "Are you okay?" The boy looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "I don't have anywhere to go," he said quietly. The young man's heart ached for the boy. He invited him inside and gave him a warm meal. As they talked, he learned that the boy had run away from a difficult home situation and had been living on the streets for weeks. The young man knew he had to help. He contacted social services and arranged for the boy to stay at a nearby shelter. Before the boy left, the young man gave him a small notebook and a pen. "Write down your thoughts," he said. "It helps." The boy nodded, clutching the notebook tightly. "Thank you," he whispered. The young man smiled. "You're always welcome here," he said. "This is a safe place." That night, as he walked home, the young man thought about the boy and the countless others like him who needed help. He realized that his work was far from over. There were still so many people who needed kindness, support, and a place to belong. He felt a renewed sense of determination to keep going, no matter how challenging it might be. The next morning, he arrived at the center early, ready to tackle the day's tasks. As he unlocked the door, he noticed a small envelope tucked under the mat. He picked it up and opened it, finding a handwritten note inside. It was from the boy he had helped the night before. "Thank you for being kind to me," the note read. "You made me feel like I matter." The young man felt tears welling up in his eyes. He thought about the elderly woman and how her kindness had inspired him to create this space. Now, he was passing that kindness on to others, creating a ripple effect that would continue to spread. He knew she would be proud. As he stood there, holding the note, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the woman who had changed his life, for the community that supported the center, and for the opportunity to make a difference. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it with the same kindness and determination that had brought him this far. And as he looked around the center, filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, he knew that her legacy would live on, not just in the walls of the center, but in the hearts of everyone who walked through its doors. The young man's life continued to revolve around the community center, but he began to feel the weight of his responsibilities. Running the center, managing volunteers, and organizing events was exhausting, and he often found himself working late into the night. Despite the challenges, he never lost sight of the elderly woman's legacy. Her kindness and wisdom were his guiding light, reminding him why he had started this journey in the first place. One evening, as he was preparing for a fundraising event, a familiar face walked through the door. It was the young boy he had helped months ago. The boy looked healthier and happier, his face glowing with a newfound confidence. "I wanted to come back and say thank you," the boy said, holding out a small drawing. It was a picture of the community center, with people holding hands and smiling. The young man felt a lump in his throat as he accepted the drawing. "This is beautiful," he said. "Thank you." The boy smiled shyly. "You helped me when no one else did," he said. "I want to help others too." The young man was touched by the boy's words. He invited him to join the center's youth program, where he could learn new skills and make friends. The boy's eyes lit up with excitement, and he eagerly agreed. As the weeks went by, the boy became a regular at the center. He helped with small tasks, participated in activities, and even started mentoring younger children. The young man watched with pride as the boy blossomed, his confidence growing with each passing day. It was a reminder of the power of kindness and how one small act could change a life. But not everything was smooth sailing. The center faced financial challenges, and the young man often worried about how to keep it running. He spent countless hours writing grant proposals and reaching out to donors, but it was a constant struggle. One particularly difficult day, as he sat at his desk staring at a pile of unpaid bills, he felt a wave of doubt wash over him. "Am I doing enough?" he wondered. "Can I really keep this going?" Just as he was about to give in to despair, he noticed the elderly woman's photograph on the wall. Her kind eyes seemed to look directly at him, filling him with a sense of calm. He remembered her words, "Keep being kind, no matter what." Taking a deep breath, he pushed aside his doubts and got back to work. He knew he couldn't give up, not when so many people depended on the center. A few days later, a miracle happened. A local business owner, inspired by the center's mission, offered to sponsor its programs for the next year. The young man was overwhelmed with gratitude. He thanked the business owner profusely, feeling a renewed sense of hope. With the financial burden lifted, he could focus on what truly mattered, helping others. The center continued to grow, becoming a beacon of hope in the community. People came not only for support but also to give back, creating a cycle of kindness that touched countless lives. The young man often thought about how far they had come and how much they had achieved. But he knew there was still more to do. One day, as he was organizing a workshop, he received a letter in the mail. It was from the elderly woman's distant relatives, the couple he had met at her grave years ago. They had been following the center's progress and wanted to contribute to its mission. Enclosed in the letter was a generous donation and a note that read, "You are keeping her spirit alive. Thank you." The young man felt tears welling up in his eyes as he read the letter. He realized that the elderly woman's legacy wasn't just about the center, it was about the lives they were touching every day. Her kindness had created a ripple effect, spreading far beyond what she could have imagined. As he stood in the center, surrounded by the sounds of laughter and conversation, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but he was ready to face them with the same kindness and determination that had brought him this far. And as he looked at the elderly woman's photograph, he whispered, "Thank you. I'll keep going, for you." The young man's dedication to the community center never wavered, but as the years passed, he began to feel the toll of his relentless work. He was in his early 30s now, and while the center was thriving, he often found himself exhausted and stretched thin. The constant demands of managing the center, fundraising, and supporting its visitors left little time for himself. Yet, every time he felt like slowing down, he would remember the elderly woman's words and the promise he had made to her. Her legacy was his driving force, and he couldn't let her down. One evening, as he was closing up the center, he noticed a young woman sitting on the steps outside. She looked to be in her mid-20s, her face etched with worry. The young man approached her gently. "Hi there," he said. "Is everything okay?" The woman looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know where else to go," she admitted. "I lost my job, and I'm about to lose my apartment. I heard this place helps people." The young man's heart went out to her. He invited her inside and listened as she shared her story. She had been working as a waitress but had been let go when the restaurant closed down. With no savings and no family to turn to, she felt completely alone. The young man assured her that she wasn't alone anymore. He helped her connect with local resources, including job training programs and temporary housing. Before she left, he handed her a pamphlet about the center's support groups. "You're not alone," he said. "We're here for you." The woman's gratitude was palpable. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't think anyone cared." Her words struck a chord with the young man. He realized that, just like the elderly woman had done for him, he was now providing hope and support to others in their darkest moments. It was a powerful reminder of why he had started this journey. As the months went by, the young woman became a regular at the center. She attended workshops, joined support groups, and even started volunteering. Her confidence grew, and she eventually found a new job. One day, she approached the young man with a smile. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "You saved my life." The young man felt a surge of pride and gratitude. He knew the elderly woman would have been proud to see how her legacy was continuing to touch lives. But despite the center's success, the young man couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. He had poured his heart and soul into the center, but he had neglected his own needs. He rarely took time for himself, and the constant stress was beginning to affect his health. One day, as he was organizing a fundraiser, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. He sat down, trying to catch his breath, and realized he couldn't keep going like this. That night, he made a difficult decision. He needed to take a step back and find a better balance between his work and personal life. He began delegating more responsibilities to his team of volunteers, trusting them to carry on the center's mission. It wasn't easy. He had always been a hands-on leader, but he knew it was necessary. As he started to take better care of himself, he noticed a change. He had more energy, and his passion for the center was reignited. He began to see the bigger picture, realizing that the center's success wasn't just about him, it was about the community coming together to support one another. He felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. One day, as he was walking through the center, he noticed a group of children laughing and playing in the corner. They were part of the center's after-school program, which provided a safe space for kids to learn and grow. The young man watched them with a smile, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what it was all about, creating a place where people could find hope, connection, and joy. As he stood there, he thought about the elderly woman and how her kindness had set all of this in motion. He felt her presence more strongly than ever, guiding him and reminding him of the importance of compassion. He knew that her legacy would live on, not just in the center, but in the hearts of everyone who walked through its doors. And as he looked around the bustling center, filled with laughter and conversation, he whispered, "Thank you. I'll keep going, for you." The young man's journey had come full circle. What had started as a simple act of kindness, helping an elderly woman carry her groceries, had grown into a life-changing mission that touched countless lives. The community center was now a thriving hub of hope and connection, a testament to the power of compassion and the legacy of the woman who had inspired it all. As the years passed, the young man continued to lead the center, but he also began to think about the future. He knew he couldn't do this forever, and he wanted to ensure that the center would continue to thrive long after he was gone. He started mentoring a group of young leaders, teaching them the values of kindness, empathy, and community that had guided him. He wanted to pass on the torch, just as the elderly woman had done for him. One of the young leaders he mentored was the boy he had helped years ago. Now a teenager, the boy had grown into a confident and compassionate young man. He had become deeply involved in the center's programs, often leading activities and mentoring younger children. The young man saw so much of himself in the boy, the same determination, the same desire to make a difference. He knew the center would be in good hands. One evening, as the young man was preparing to step down as the center's director, he gathered everyone together for a special announcement. The room was filled with volunteers, visitors, and community members who had been touched by the center's work. He stood at the front, his heart full of gratitude. "This center was born out of kindness," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "It was inspired by a woman who believed in the power of compassion and the importance of community. She changed my life, and together, we've changed the lives of so many others. But now, it's time for a new chapter." He announced that he would be stepping down as director and passing the role to the young boy he had mentored. The room erupted into applause, and the boy, now a young man, stepped forward, his eyes filled with determination. "I'll do my best to honor this legacy," he said, his voice strong. The young man smiled, knowing the center was in good hands. As he transitioned into a new role as an advisor, the young man felt a deep sense of peace. He had fulfilled his promise to the elderly woman, creating a space where kindness and community could flourish. He knew her legacy would live on, not just in the center, but in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by its work. One day, as he was walking through the center, he noticed a new visitor, an elderly man sitting quietly in the corner, looking around with curiosity. The young man approached him with a warm smile. "Welcome," he said. "Is this your first time here?" The man nodded. I heard about this place from a friend, he said. I've been feeling lonely lately, and I thought maybe this could help. The young man's heart went out to him. He recognized the look in the man's eyes, the same look he had seen in the elderly woman's eyes all those years ago. You're in the right place, he said gently. We're here to support each other. He invited the man to join a storytelling event that evening, and the man hesitantly agreed. That night, the elderly man shared his story with the group. He spoke about losing his wife and feeling isolated in his grief. The room was silent as he spoke, everyone listening with empathy and understanding. When he finished, the group erupted into applause, and the man looked around, his eyes filled with tears. Thank you, he whispered. I didn't realize how much I needed this. The young man felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was exactly what the elderly woman had wanted, a place where people could come together, share their burdens, and find hope. He knew she would have been proud. As he left the center that night, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the woman who had changed his life, for the community that supported the center, and for the opportunity to make a difference. He knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but he was ready to face them with the same kindness and determination that had brought him this far. And as he looked up at the stars, he whispered, "Thank you. Your legacy lives on."